What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So today we have a bit of a warning for Switch owners, as a person on Reddit discovered that you can actually destroy your system using certain cleaning ingredients, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a big little breakthrough in the modding community, now taking a game console and making it probably the smallest we've seen so far. And then we also have Gamescom coming up. And if you've ever wondered how much it costs to have a spot, maybe to show off a game for 60 seconds, well, it looks like some of that pricing got out there, and it definitely shocked the internet. That's putting it lightly. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members to the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with a couple of games you should be able to look forward to here this week. In fact, one should be going into Game Pass tomorrow, but the other later on this week. We can see this was posted up. This is over on Twitter X. This is from Extas, who says, you imagine it, but I can now 100% confirm the arrival of MW3 to Game Pass on PC and console July 24th. So tomorrow, that would coincide with their season that will be launching as well. Makes sense that they would then also just put it into Game Pass. The first big Call of Duty game going into the service, so MW3, look out for that, seemingly tomorrow. And then on the 26th, so to cap off this week, it looks like Valorant will be launching on consoles, that being on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. It has been in beta for a little while now, so it makes sense that we're finally rolling up to its release. And the fact that it's a free-to-play game, they can pretty much launch it whenever they want, and it seems like they're going to make that announcement and then just drop it either a day or two later, or maybe even that same day. So, two first-person shooters to look forward to here, one coming to consoles for the first time, the other at least going into Game Pass. And if you have Game Pass but have not picked up Call of Duty, well, the campaign itself wasn't very good, but the multiplayer, it's still classic Call of Duty and might be worth checking out, just provided, of course, you have the hard drive space for it. Also, we had some acquisition news yesterday. This was posted up over on Market Watch, with Warner Bros. Games to buy Player First Games. Now, they are the developers behind Multiverses, which did come back a couple of months ago after being gone for like, what, a year or something? It was a very strange situation where they just took the game down, the live service game, completely. Even if you put money into it, they just went on hiatus with it. You couldn't access it, nothing. But now that it's come back, it seems like people are enjoying it. They're putting more and more characters into it, and it would make sense that they would make the move here to pick up the developer behind the game, where they say, we have worked with Player First Games over several years to create and launch Multiverses, and we are very pleased to welcome this talented team to Warner Bros. Games. So just in terms of development and streamlining the processes behind the scenes, finances, it does make it, I'm sure, easier to then bring them into the fold, especially if they are that confident in Multiverses, and it seems like they are. So yeah, again, it all makes sense logistically for them to just go ahead and acquire a studio that most likely will be working on this live service game for years and years into the future, unless they want to go on a prolonged break randomly again. Oh, and while we do have ChinaJoy coming up here, one game was actually missing from PlayStation's lineup that we were kind of hoping to see there. Well, it appears they will indeed be in attendance, and that is Lost Soul Aside. They posted this up on their official account, saying during ChinaJoy on July 26th, so later this week, game director Yang Bing will give an interview. Gameplay will be streamed during that time, so keep your eyes open. And we have been wondering for a little while now if Lost Soul Aside would get its release date, because while it was shown off for the first time back in 2016, it was enough for to go into PlayStation's China Hero project, and really ever since then, it's just been in development behind the scenes, occasionally peeking out to show off some gameplay or a trailer, but it has been rated in China, and we're actually expecting it to come out before the end of this year, so maybe this is a good spot for them to make the official announcement for the release date, but I guess we'll find out here in a couple of days. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a bit of, a warning for Switch owners, as this post went viral online, and you can kind of see why right away. This was over on Reddit, where a person put up a picture of their special or limited edition Switch missing some of its etching. You might be wondering, why is it missing that? Well, they say don't clean your Switch with designs with rubbing alcohol. They used 91% rubbing alcohol to clean all their electronics and have never had an issue before. Didn't expect it to completely take off the design. We're currently in mourning and debating on buying another Tears of the Kingdom Switch just for the backplate. Hey, unless someone knows where to buy a replacement one with this design. Sometimes you'll see them pop up on places like eBay. It's not as frequent, though. I think with something like a newer one like this, especially with the OLED Switch model, those seem to be a bit more sporadic when they get listed. But maybe in a few years, you'll see them randomly pop up. However, how authentic are they? That's another question to have there. But in this case, using 91% rubbing alcohol will indeed have this effect on certain plastics. It does depend, obviously, on the plastic itself, what was being used here during creation from these companies. But with the etchings that Nintendo is using, yes, they seem to be very vulnerable to things like 91% rubbing alcohol. Over on Nintendo's website, they do recommend seemingly 70% rubbing alcohol, but even that, it's not really that necessary. So with 70%, it's more diluted. Obviously, 91% to 70%. But when it comes to plastics, you can just use warm water and soap. I mean, I would still recommend using like a toothbrush to get around certain crevices and stuff. I feel like people get really, really worried when they hear electronic and water, just because we've always been trained to keep the two completely separate. And for the most part, you should. Like, don't dunk your Switch, obviously, in the sink or something. But generally, that's the safest and usually most effective way to clean up a system that may just be dirty, whether it's with dust or just like complete grime, using just a toothbrush, a little cup with warm water and some soap, like just hand soap is fine usually, like degreasing soap, and then you can just kind of scrub away at the device, in this case, the Switch. So yeah, rubbing alcohol, if you use that on controllers, it'll sort of take this top layer off of it, and that can also affect the feel and even the look, especially if it's kind of a glossy surface. You'd be surprised. 91% rubbing alcohol can definitely tear up certain surfaces like that. But it's really just used mostly for, say, a PCB. So if you're working on a motherboard, typically use 91% rubbing alcohol. It will generally evaporate very, very quickly and won't leave much debris behind at all. And I mostly brought this up because there are people in the comments for that Reddit thread who said they had no idea, and they probably would have used 91% alcohol on a system at some point in the future, whether it's a Switch that's limited edition with the etchings or another. So for the most part, again, warm water, soap, or according to Nintendo, 70% rubbing alcohol is fine. So that's kind of the route I would go with it. Just sort of a heads up for the future, just to hopefully save you some money. Next up, let's talk about Gamescom opening night live. Of course, that'll be happening at the end of August to kick off Gamescom. And this is another Jeff Keighley show. It coincides basically with what he does with Summer Game Fest and the Video Game Awards at the end of the year. But people have always wondered, how much does it cost to have a spot there? Because we see games, of course, show up, big name games, like we have like Monster Hunter Wilds was at a recent Jeff Keighley event, and others. And how much does it cost, obviously, for advertisements? It's something that has been a pretty big mystery for people. Well, we have some figures we can go over here, and again, it definitely shocked many people online how expensive it is to have, say, a 30-second or a 60-second spot in this show. So think about how you go through, and it's basically like commercial after commercial after commercial. Yes, they're game trailers, but they are there to sell you on a product. Still, though, we can see this is posted up, and this is according to Tech Raptor, as they spotted this, saying it can cost up to $288,000 to get a spot on the main opening night live show. Of course, there's still a pre-show that happens, and there are spots there. Apparently, that is actually cheaper, which would make sense, as you expect the height of the viewership during the main event, if you will. But that is the max price. That's with a 2-minute or 120-second spot during that broadcast. Now, you can also opt for a 90-second spot that's $234,000, 60 seconds, that's $179,600, and 30 seconds. That will run you, let's say, roughly $125,000. And yeah, it's not cheap. I mean, here's the thing. We know Jeff Keighley has talked about with all of his shows, millions of people tune in, and that is, of course, factored into how much it costs to have a spot at these shows, and it has gone up, which, again, viewership has gone up, and I do think that's one of the reasons, obviously, that Jeff will go out there after a show and be like, look how many millions of people tuned in across all these different live streams. We had the entire world of gaming having their eyes on this presentation that night. It's, of course, to sell packages to these different companies. Now, it is important to note, though, there are some games out there, and I mentioned Monster Hunter Wilds, that's probably a good example, that it doesn't cost them money because they are, I guess, be a quote-unquote tentpole announcement. One, that people go in to the event looking for. So to have it there is worth it on its own rather than try to convince, say, Capcom to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to show off a game that they already know is going to sell stupid amounts of copy when it launches, if it's at, say, Opening Night Live or the Game Awards or Summer Game Fest or not. And I do want to say, while these figures were shocking again to people online, it's always kind of been like the E3 is out of control, well, was out of control at one point in time, costing millions and millions of dollars to be in attendance just on the show floor. While these figures are just for Opening Night Live, it doesn't count the show floor at Gamescom. Still, it's not cheap, basically, to advertise your product or your game at any of these like high-profile events. But there you go. Now we at least have an idea or a ballpark for some of the money that these different games are paying out to be in front of you that night. Next up, let's talk about a very impressive project in the modding community that is working to make, I think, like the smallest game console we've seen so far, specifically taking a console that already exists and shrinking it down, and that being the Wii. They're working to make that system actually fit on your keychain. Seriously, take a look at this. This is posted up again over on Twitter X. This is from Weskmods. Says they've been cooking up something special over the past year or so. Happy to show it off. A Wii console size of a keychain. I mean, check this thing out. This is really, really cool. It has the Nintendo Kawaii, CNC'd, anodized, laser marked, passively cooled. And that's the big thing, because if it wasn't, well, the footprint would basically be the size of the fan. That's how small they're aiming to have this thing. And in fact, over on the forums that they link to here, they show off internal shots of this. And a lot of this comes down to really the community figuring out how to cut down the Wii motherboard to the size. Like really, they cut it down with a Dremel, and they have to rearrange certain parts. Like there's a little bit of rewiring that happens, but no, the Wii, it's actually a very resilient motherboard to get to that size. Yes, you still have to keep the processor, the GPU, and that stuff intact in its section of the board along with the memory, but for the most part, everything else can be rewired and shaped to fit into this small enclosure. And in order to make this work, because remember, you would still have to have, if you want to have GameCube support, which I assume most people do, or a power input or a power button, we'd also have to have all of those things be accounted for with the footprint. And rather than try to attach to the main system, they created a dock. That is an incredibly clever solution here, by the way, as it seems to be customized completely. I look at this thing. So a really, really cool stuff here. Now they are working to basically crowdfund orders to send out so they can have all this stuff anodized, set up, developed, and then sent back to everyone. So I believe right now they're just pulling orders. So, hey, if you're interested, you can go over and see what the situation is there. But they have a comparison shot to the Short Stack and the GameCube Nano, and this thing is, I mean, it looks significantly smaller than both of those, and the Short Stack is the size of a pack of playing cards for the Wii. I thought that was the smallest we were going to get that system. Nope. The modding community just keeps on impressing. Really, really cool stuff. It'd be interesting to take a shot at that. It would, because right now that seems to be a big trend for the modding community, is actually taking systems and making them smaller. Not necessarily turning them just into handhelds, but just legitimately making them small. There's a PS2 Slim that I wouldn't mind taking a shot at either, because you don't actually have to carve down the motherboard at all. And that might be a bit more approachable for just viewers out there who want to take on a weekend project. So maybe that's the next one I'll go to, but I'm going to keep my eye on the Kawaii, because that might be set up for a tech wave down the road. We'll see. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Microsoft and their Game Pass tiers that did see a bit of a shakeup recently. But there are also questions around cheaper tiers as well. They've mostly just made the service more expensive. But we have heard rumors around the idea of maybe an ad-supported free tier, or one that's just based on cloud. We can see this actually over on Windows Central. This is a report from Jez Corden, who says, I've heard that Microsoft is working towards a cloud-only version of its subscription that would be cheaper and more approachable to buy than Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. This would be designed around users who simply aren't interested in buying an Xbox console, which could include competing console platform players. So first thing, I think it is important for Microsoft to come up with a cloud-only tier, because GeForce Now has that, Amazon Luna has that, and it would work, of course, to make it so that you don't have to sell people on a $20 per month tier if they just want to do cloud streaming through this Fire Stick TV initiative they have now, because otherwise they're going to be buying two things they don't really care for, then, I mean, they're not going to take advantage of it, whether it's PC or console. They just want to just stream it maybe through the Fire Stick or other platforms that support it. So if you get that cost down, I would even say significantly. If you're just doing cloud stuff, it might be like a $7, $8 a month thing. Maybe they push for 10, but it has to be pretty cheap to be competitive with some of the other services, considering Microsoft is kind of lagging behind, to me, when it comes to quality, latency, basically everything across the board for that streaming experience. The other thing that's brought up here that's very, very interesting is the idea that it would work maybe on other platforms, like competing platforms like PlayStation or Nintendo. That's interesting, because then you could have a curated list from that device, and that might be a big hang-up for Sony or even Nintendo. If Microsoft can make it so that you only access first-party Xbox games, say from your Switch or from your PlayStation, so it does not compete directly with third-party sales, they might be more open to that, and that might be the path. Yes, you'd still be streaming this stuff on your Switch, your next-generation system from Nintendo, or on your PlayStation 5, but it's better than just not having it there. And if it's just a subscription service and Game Pass works into that to where you can have it more on just like a whim, like, oh, I will go ahead and fire up Gears 5 or something just for fun to try it out here on the PlayStation. No downloads, no updates. It's right then and there for, I'll even say $10 a month. That might be compelling to many people out there, but that is something Microsoft, I think, absolutely has to figure out, because having Game Pass Ultimate be the only way to access cloud and then also try to push this Fire Stick thing is just very, very weird. They definitely have to set that up a bit better to have a more approachable tier for people who just want to stream. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, Switch owners, do you use a special edition system as your main device? 78% say no. 22% though say yes, they are using a limited edition or special edition system. I'm sure there are people out there who buy the systems. I obviously have seen it. There are plenty of people I know even who just have them boxed and they just leave them and they're like, hey, it's really cool to collect these systems. But still, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who buy the limited edition system because they like the franchise, like the way it looks, and they do use it. Like, there are Joy-Cons that I had been using from the Skyward Sword one. I just have been using those. I think they're really cool. But for like my Switch, it's just the standard OLED model. But yeah, I also have Switch systems that are just like the limited edition ones that are like just for collection's sake. So, interesting though that it is up to 22% here, and shows that Nintendo's strategy to do some of these special editions has worked, although I feel like they could have done much more with certain limited edition ones, especially when we got to look at like the Mario edition where they changed the entire thing to red. That I think would have been a lot more fun for Nintendo to play around with throughout this generation. But hey, maybe next gen they decide to get a bit more serious with some of the looks around the consoles to coincide with the franchise that they have the limited edition set up for. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Vone, who says, "You're wrong, Spawnwave. SVC Chaos SNK versus Capcom was not an Xbox exclusive in North America back then. It was also on Neo Geo AES console in North America as well. Thing is, not many people own a Neo Geo AES, so nobody knows about it." That is true. It was on the Neo Geo AES. I was more referring to when they ported it to PS2 and Xbox. Didn't come out on the PS2 in North America, just on Xbox, but you are right, you could have bought it for the AES console, which, by the way, I wanted to look just to see what pricing was on that cartridge, because Neo Geo AES was expensive when it came out. It's even more expensive now, and I think there are different versions of this game. I think it's like different regions, obviously, whether it's in Japan or the English version, or just the North American version, and there's a range of prices up to $2,500 for it complete. If you have a Neo Geo collection, you're sitting pretty right now. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whereas the warning for Switch owners when it comes to 91% rubbing alcohol on the Switch. Hopefully the image of that Tears of the Kingdom Switch missing half its etching didn't cause you too much pain. And also, what about the Gamescom prices for these different companies to have 30, 60, 90-second ad spots in these shows? And the Wii, as small enough to fit on your keychain, what system would you actually like to see get that small so you can take it wherever you go? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.